Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I still remember that evening at the lake. Carly asked me to meet at the same dock where I'd proposed 2 years earlier. I didn't know it then, but that conversation would end our engagement. She was already waiting when I arrived. I thought this would be the right place, she said with a faint smile. I looked around. To talk or to end something? Her smile disappeared. We need privacy. You've got it. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she took a slow breath. I'm pregnant. I nodded once. Okay. She looked almost disappointed by my reaction. Then she lowered her eyes. It's not yours. I stared at her without saying a word. Finally, I asked, say that again. She looked back at me. I met someone during my vacation. His name doesn't matter. It happened and I'm keeping the baby. I folded my arms. You flew to the coast for a week, slept with another man, came home pregnant, and now you're telling me here. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. She stepped closer. I don't want this to change our future. Our future? I still want us to get married. I almost laughed. You expect me to raise another man's child? We can tell everyone it's yours. No one has to know. I looked at her for a long second. You already thought this through. She nodded. I've spoken with an attorney. Canceling the wedding now won't be simple. We've signed contracts together. We're on the apartment lease together. We've mixed money for the wedding. Walking away is going to cost you. There it was. Not guilt, not regret. Pressure. You really believe that? I asked. I'm trying to protect both of us. No, I said. You're trying to protect yourself. Her voice became firmer. If you think about it logically, staying together is still the better option. I looked at her for a second. You came here believing you were giving me two choices, I said. She frowned. I looked her straight in the eyes. You forgot something. What? I make my own choices. I turned around and walked toward my truck. She called my name twice. I never looked back. Instead of driving home, I pulled out my phone and called the only person I trusted to help me sort through what had just happened. Samuel, I said when he answered. I need you. Samuel Brooks had spent 25 years in law enforcement before opening his own private investigation agency. He wasn't the kind of man who jumped to conclusions. He believed evidence always spoke louder than anger. He opened his front door, took one look at me, and said, Come inside. I told him everything. The vacation, the pregnancy, the wedding, the attorney, every word Carly had said at the lake. When I finished, Samuel leaned back in his chair. Don't go back to that apartment alone, he said. I was planning to pack my things tonight. Then I'm coming with you. An hour later, we unlocked the apartment. Carly wasn't there. She had texted earlier saying she was staying with her sister for a few days. Samuel didn't wander around. He looked at everything with purpose. Don't touch anything yet, he said. He took photographs of the living room, unopened mail, travel receipts sitting on the counter, and a folder containing wedding contracts. Then he stopped beside the couch. Roger, he said quietly. Whose tablet is this? Carly's. It shouldn't still be here. The screen lit up with new notifications. Carly had never changed her passcode. She'd been using the same 4 numbers for years. After I unlocked it, Samuel opened the messaging app. Let's start with the recent conversations, he said. It didn't take long. One conversation caught his attention. It was with someone named Tyler. Samuel opened it. The newest messages were about the pregnancy. Then he kept scrolling. The conversation didn't stop at the vacation. It went back almost 6 months. Video calls, flight confirmations, hotel reservations. One message made Samuel stop scrolling. Once the wedding is close enough, he'll never walk away. He has too much invested. Another came a few days later. After the trip, I'll tell him everything. He'll be angry, but he'll calm down. Men like Roger always choose stability. I read those lines twice. The affair hadn't started on the vacation. The vacation had been the reward. Samuel quietly exported the messages, preserving every date and timestamp. Then he looked at me. This wasn't one mistake, he said. I nodded. No. It was a plan. I grabbed the folder with my personal documents and the spare keys. As we walked out, Samuel locked the apartment behind us. They think they're ahead, he said. I looked back at the building one last time. They're about to find out they're not. 2 days later, Carly called. I let it ring once before answering. Can we meet? She asked. Her voice sounded softer than it had at the lake. I've already heard what you had to say. Not everything. I looked across Samuel's office. He was reviewing copies of the messages we'd saved. Without looking up, He simply nodded. Let her talk. Tomorrow, I said. 1 o'clock. The cafe on Riverside. I'll be there. She was already waiting when I arrived. No makeup. Hair tied back. She looked tired. It might have worked on someone else. I sat down across from her. You look like you haven't been sleeping, she said. I've been busy. She wrapped both hands around her coffee. I've made mistakes. I didn't answer. I never wanted to hurt you. You already did. Her eyes dropped to the table. I was lonely while I was away. You were lonely for 6 months? I asked. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? Instead of answering, I slid several printed pages across the table. She stared at the first page, then the second. By the third, the color drained from her face. Where did you get these? I didn't steal them, if that's what you're asking. You went through my tablet. I looked at what was already there. She flipped another page. The hotel booking, the flight confirmation, the messages planning the trip. She stopped reading. It isn't what you think. I leaned back. Tell me what I'm supposed to think. Her voice cracked. I thought I loved him. And? He left. I wasn't surprised. He stopped answering after I told him about the baby. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached across the table. Roger, you're still the only man I trust. I looked at her hand until she slowly pulled it back. You don't trust me, I said calmly. You trust what I can do for you. Tears formed in her eyes. I don't want to raise this baby alone. Neither do I. She blinked. What? I don't want you raising it with me. That landed harder than I expected. She looked away. I thought, eventually, you'd do the responsible thing. I couldn't help shaking my head. Responsible doesn't mean accepting someone else's choices. Her shoulders stiffened. So that's it? No. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was the receipt from the wedding venue. Across the top, stamped in bold red letters, was one word. Canceled. I canceled the venue this morning, I said. The photographer an hour later. The caterer after lunch. She stared at me. You didn't? I did. You had no right. I had every right. Her breathing became heavier. You've ruined our wedding. I stood up. No, Carly. I looked her straight in the eye. You ruined it the day you booked that vacation. Without another word, I turned and walked out. Hidden in my jacket pocket, my phone continued recording every word she just said. Samuel had suggested it. Something told me we'd need it before this was over. 3 days after I canceled the wedding, the phone calls started. The first came from a client. Roger, he said carefully. I heard you and Carly split up. Everything okay? I'm fine. There was a pause. They're saying you left your pregnant fiancée. I leaned back in my chair. Who's they? I've heard it from a few people. I thanked him, ended the call, and immediately called Samuel. She's moving first, I said. I figured she would, he replied. People believe the first story they hear. So let's change that. He already had another lead. I looked into Tyler. What did you find? He isn't who Carly thought he was. Samuel had spoken with people who knew him. Tyler traveled often, dated several women in different cities, and had no intention of settling down. The promises he'd made Carly about a future together weren't promises at all. They were lines he had used before. So she blew up her own life for a man who never planned to stay, I said. Looks that way. That afternoon, I drove to see Carly's cousin, Emma Grant. She answered the door with her arms folded. I don't have much to say to you. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. She hesitated before stepping outside. Carly said you abandoned her. I ended the engagement. While she's pregnant. With another man's baby. Emma frowned. She never said that. I know. I handed her a small envelope. Inside were only 3 printed pages. Not everything. Just enough. She read them slowly. By the time she finished, her expression had completely changed. These are real? They are. She looked down at the papers again. I defended her. You defended the story you were told. She didn't argue. She simply nodded once. I'm not asking you to take my side, I said. I'm asking you not to repeat a lie. I won't. That was enough. On the drive back, I made another round of calls. The florist, the musician, the honeymoon agency. Every reservation still in my name was canceled before another payment came due. By sunset, almost every loose end had been tied off. Carly thought she could control the story. She thought I'd spend my time defending myself while she stayed one step ahead. She was wrong. Every move I made took away another piece of the leverage she thought she had. The following Monday, I met my attorney, Benjamin Foster. Samuel came with me. Benjamin had already reviewed the evidence Samuel collected, but he wanted to hear everything directly from me. "Start at the beginning," he said. So I did. The proposal, the vacation, the pregnancy, the meeting at the lake, the conversations on Carly's tablet, the cafe, the recording. I kept it simple. No drama, just facts. When I finished, Benjamin organized the papers into neat stacks. "You've done something most people don't," he said. "What's that?" "You documented everything before reacting." Samuel smiled. "I made sure of it." Benjamin nodded. "Good. It may save you a lot of trouble." He spent another 20 minutes reviewing bank statements and wedding invoices. Then he stopped. "Roger, what is it? Did you approve these charges?" He turned one statement toward me. Several expensive purchases had been billed to my company's business account: designer furniture, luxury decorations, a weekend spa package. None of them had anything to do with my software consulting business. I frowned. "No." Benjamin pulled another statement. "And these? More purchases, custom wedding decorations, jewelry, designer clothing, luxury hotel deposits, all charged over several months. I never even saw these." "You wouldn't have," Benjamin said. "The statements were sent electronically." Samuel leaned forward. "Carly handled your bookkeeping after your office manager retired, didn't she?" I looked at him. "For a few months." Benjamin tapped the paperwork. "That gave her access." The room went quiet. The pregnancy had started this. Now we were looking at something bigger. Benjamin closed the folder. "She didn't just deceive you personally." He slid the statements across the desk. "She blurred the line between your personal life and your business." Later that afternoon, Carly's attorney called. Benjamin put the call on speaker. "My client is willing to resolve this privately," he said. "What are the terms?" Benjamin asked. "The engagement ends. No lawsuits, no public hearing. Both parties sign confidentiality agreements and move on." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was obvious. "They're scared," I said. Benjamin muted the call for a moment and looked at me. "I think they know how this will end," he said. He turned the microphone back on. "My client has heard the proposal." "And?" Benjamin looked at me. I didn't hesitate. "Tell them no." He repeated my answer. Silence followed. Finally, the other attorney spoke. "I'd advise your client to think carefully." Benjamin smiled. "He already has." The call ended. Samuel looked at me. "You know this is going public now." I stood and gathered the folders. She wanted pressure to make me surrender. I tucked the evidence under my arm. Now she'll find out pressure works both ways. For the first time since Carly came home from that vacation, I wasn't reacting to her next move. She was reacting to mine. The mediation was scheduled for the following week. Benjamin told me to expect one last attempt to avoid a hearing. "They know the evidence isn't on their side," he said. "They're hoping you'll settle anyway." "I won't." Samuel came with us, carrying a folder containing every document he had collected and preserved. Carly was already seated when we walked into the conference room. She looked at me for a second. "You really brought a private investigator?" Samuel answered before I could. "You hired a lawyer before telling him you were pregnant. We all make preparations." Her attorney cleared his throat. "Let's stay focused." For the first hour, everyone stayed polite. Then Carly spoke. "I never tried to manipulate Roger." Benjamin slid my recorded conversation across the table. "Actually," he said, "you did." The recording played. Her own voice filled the room. She talked about the wedding, the shared apartment, the financial consequences if I walked away. Every word came from her. Nobody interrupted. When it ended, the mediator looked at Carly. "Did you make these statements?" She hesitated. "Yes." Benjamin opened another folder. "Let's continue." He introduced the messages from the tablet, then the travel timeline, then the hotel reservation made months before the vacation. Finally, Samuel explained exactly how the digital evidence had been preserved without altering it. Everything matched: dates, times, locations. There was nowhere left to hide. Carly tried one last argument. "I made mistakes, but I was scared." Benjamin stayed calm. "Being scared doesn't explain planning an affair for 6 months." Silence filled the room. Her attorney leaned toward her and whispered something. She slowly nodded. The mediator closed his notebook. "I believe we've heard enough." By the afternoon, an agreement had been drafted. Carly accepted responsibility for most of the canceled wedding costs. Neither of us would owe the other ongoing financial support. The apartment lease would be terminated. My company remained completely untouched. A few days later, the judge approved the agreement without changes. Outside the courthouse, Carly caught up with me before I reached my truck. "You really couldn't let this end quietly." I looked at her. "You tried to trap me. I was trying to save what we had." "No!" I shook my head. "You were trying to save yourself." She folded her arms. "You've ruined my future." I opened my truck door. "No, Carly." I looked at her one last time. "I stopped you from ruining mine." Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away. In the mirror, I saw her standing alone on the courthouse steps. For the first time since she came back from that vacation, she had no plan left. About 9 months later, I heard Carly had given birth. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from Emma. She called one evening and asked if I had a minute. "I thought you should know," she said. "Tyler isn't around." I'm not surprised. He asked for a DNA test after the baby was born. And? It proved he's the father. I leaned back in my chair. Did he step up? Emma was quiet for a moment. He signed the paperwork. That's something. But he still left. I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't angry either. It wasn't my story anymore. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a while. My software consulting company had grown more in the past year than it had in the previous 3. I had hired another developer, signed 2 long-term contracts, and moved into a new apartment closer to work. Life was quieter, less complicated. There were no arguments waiting when I got home, no questions about trust, just peace. Over the next few weeks, a few mutual friends reached out. Some apologized. One admitted, "I believed what Carly told us. I should have asked you before judging." I nodded. "I appreciate you saying that." He looked relieved. "You don't seem angry." I was. I picked up my coffee. But anger has an expiration date. Facts don't. Another friend asked if I regretted canceling the wedding. I answered without thinking. The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. That was honest. One afternoon, Samuel stopped by my office. He looked around and smiled. "Business is doing well." "It is. You ever think about dating again?" I laughed. "One disaster at a time." He grinned. "Fair enough." Before leaving, he paused at the door. "You know what your biggest win was?" "What?" "You never let someone else's bad decision become your responsibility." After he left, I thought about that for a minute. He was right. Carly wanted me to carry consequences I didn't create. When I refused, people called me cold. Later, after the truth came out, those same people called me smart. Neither opinion mattered much anymore. What mattered was simple. I had protected my future. And for the first time in a long time, it belonged only to me. Almost a year after everything ended, I found myself back at the same lake. I hadn't planned it. A meeting nearby finished earlier than expected, and before I knew it, I was parked a few hundred feet from the dock where Carly had changed both of our lives. I walked the rest of the way. The place looked exactly as it had that evening. The water was calm. The old wooden railing was still there. People walked past without knowing what had happened there. To them, it was just another quiet afternoon. To me, it was where one future ended and another began. I stood where Carly had told me she was pregnant. I could still hear her saying we should go through with the wedding, that nobody had to know, that I should raise another man's child because it was the easiest solution. She thought she had already written the ending. Marry her, sign the birth certificate, smile in the photographs, spend the rest of my life paying for decisions that were never mine. She believed those were my only options. She was wrong. Leaving wasn't the easy choice. Neither was canceling the wedding or starting over. But none of those decisions cost me my self-respect. I rested one hand on the railing for a moment, then smiled to myself. Not because Carly had lost, because I hadn't. There was a difference. Winning isn't always watching someone else fail. Sometimes it's refusing to let them pull you down with them. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Samuel asking if I still wanted to grab dinner. I replied that I'd be there in 20 minutes. As I slipped the phone back into my pocket, I took one last look across the lake. A year earlier, I had stood in that exact spot, convinced I knew what my future looked like. I couldn't have been more wrong. Losing Carly wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. Building a life around a lie would have been. I turned, walked back to my truck, and started the engine. The dock disappeared in the rearview mirror. This time, I didn't drive away wondering what came next. I already knew. The wedding never happened. The life she planned for me never happened either. And that was the best outcome I could have asked for. Sometimes people think strength is staying no matter what. I learned something different. Real strength is knowing exactly when to leave and never looking back. Thank you for watching.